My house in Carmel is a conversation with the sea. I designed it that way. The entire west-facing wall is a single massive pane of glass, and the Pacific Ocean is a living, breathing mural that changes with the light. Some days it is a calm, meditative sapphire. Other days, like tonight, it is a churning, angry slate gray, the waves crashing against the rocks below in a show of magnificent, percussive fury. I find the sound comforting. It is a reminder that some things are too vast, too powerful to be controlled. It is a good reminder for a writer. My name is Elena Suarez. I am 68 years old. I have lived in this house, this beautiful sanctuary of glass and stone and quiet, for 20 years. I shared it with my husband, George, for 18 of those years. He has been gone for 2, but his presence is still here, a gentle, happy echo. In the quiet rooms, his reading glasses are still on the nightstand. His favorite well-worn armchair still sits opposite mine in front of the fireplace. Our life together was a long, beautiful story. A story I have told in various fictional forms in the 12 novels I have written. My books have brought me a great deal of success, of financial security, of a quiet literary fame. They have, in short, given me everything my parents told me I could never have. Tonight, on this cool, foggy evening of Sunday, August 10th, 2025, I was doing what I always did. I was sitting in my armchair, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the sea and wrestling with a particularly stubborn chapter in my new book. The house was silent, save for the roar of the ocean and the gentle crackle of the fire. It was a perfect, peaceful, and utterly predictable evening. And then the phone rang. And the ghost of a life I had buried 50 years ago came screaming back. The number was unfamiliar, a local area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some strange, forgotten instinct made me answer. Hello, am I speaking with an Elena Suarez? The voice on the other end was a young woman, her tone professional, cautious. This is she, I said. Ms. Suarez, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a social worker with the San Mateo County Adult Protective Services. My blood went cold. San Mateo County, Daly City. The place I had not set foot in for half a century. I'm calling you. The social worker continued, regarding a Mr. Mateo Suarez and a Mrs. Luz Suarez. Our records indicate that you are their next of kin, Mateo and Luz, my father and my mother. Names I had not said out loud in decades. They were not names to me anymore. They were characters. The cold, unyielding antagonists in the tragic, secret origin story of my own life. I am their daughter, I said, my voice a strange, rusty thing. Ms. Suarez, the social worker said, her voice full of a practiced, clinical sympathy. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your parents' home was foreclosed upon last month. They were evicted. We found them 2 days ago, living in their car. They are currently in a temporary county shelter. They are not in good health, Ms. Suarez, and they have nowhere else to go? The world, the beautiful, peaceful, and carefully constructed world of my Carmel home, simply stopped. The roar of the ocean faded. The crackle of the fire went silent. All I could hear was the frantic, panicked pounding of my own heart. The sound of a terrified 18-year-old girl's heart, a heart I had thought had died a long, long time ago. They refused to give me your contact information. The social worker continued, her voice a distant, buzzing sound. They are very proud, but we found you through a public records search, Ms. Suarez. They need your help. They are your parents." She paused. "Your father. He would like to speak. With you? Is that all right?" I could not form the word no. I could not form any words at all. I just stood there, my hand gripping the phone, a silent 68-year-old statue of pure, unadulterated shock. There was a fumbling sound on the other end of the line. And then a voice I had not heard in 50 years, a voice that was thin and frail and broken, but still, terribly, horribly, my father's Elena. He whispered, "A knock, Daly City, California, 1973. The air in our small, cramped house was always thick with the smell of lumpia and unspoken disappointment. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom box in Daly City, a place that was not yet the vibrant Filipino community it is today. Back then, we were an island, a small, lonely outpost of our culture in a vast American sea. My parents, Mateo and Elena Suarez, had come to America from Sibalam, a small fishing village in the Philippines, with nothing but a fierce, desperate dream of a better life for their children. Their dream, however, was a very specific one. It was a dream of security, of safety, of a life that was the exact opposite of the one they had left behind. They had sacrificed everything for this dream. My father worked 2 jobs, at a factory and as a janitor. My mother cleaned the houses of the wealthy white families in the hills. They were a team, united in their relentless, back-breaking pursuit of the American dream. And their dream for me, their only American-born daughter, was just as specific. I was to be a nurse. A sensible, respectable, and, most importantly, a stable profession. I was to marry a good, sensible, and, most importantly, a Filipino Catholic boy. I was to live a good, quiet, and predictable life. I was to be the living, breathing dividend of their lifelong investment of suffering. But I had a different dream. My dream was not of stability. It was of stories. I was a reader, a writer. The small local library was my church. And my God was a man named Ernest Hemingway. I did not want to be a nurse. I wanted to be a novelist. To my parents, this was not just a different dream. It was a betrayal. It was a frivolous, self-indulgent American fantasy. It was a slap in the face to their years of sacrifice. The final unforgivable sin, however, was George. He was my high school boyfriend. He was brilliant and kind and funny. He was going to be a professor of literature. He saw the writer in me, and he watered that secret, fragile seed with his belief in me. He was the love of my life. He was also a tall, lanky, and impossibly white boy from a family of atheists. He was, in my parents' eyes, a demon sent to lead their daughter down a path of literary and spiritual ruin. The final confrontation. The night the world ended came in our small, plastic-covered living room. I was 18. I had just been offered a full scholarship to study literature at UC Berkeley. It was the greatest achievement of my young life. To my parents, it was the final act of defiance. "You will not go," my father had said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He was a small man, but he was filled with the unshakable, absolute authority of a Filipino patriarch. "You will go to the community college, you will get your nursing degree, and you will end this foolishness with this." This white boy? It is not foolishness. "Papa," I had cried, my voice full of a desperate, pleading passion. "It is my life, is my dream." And George is not a white boy. He is the man I love. Love. My mother had scoffed, her voice a blade of pure, cold contempt. What do you know of love? Love is sacrifice. Love is duty. Love is what your father and I have done for you. And this is how you repay us. By throwing your life away on these American dreams. On a boy who will never understand our family, our culture, our God. The argument had raged for hours. A storm of tears, of recriminations, of two generations, two cultures, two worlds colliding in a small, suffocating living room. It ended with an ultimatum. My father stood before me, his face a mask of stone. "You will choose Elena," he said, his voice quiet and therefore more terrifying than any shout. "You will choose our family, our way, the life we have sacrificed everything to give. You will choose him, this boy, this foolish dream. And if you choose them, you are no longer our daughter." I looked at their hard, unforgiving faces, and I saw that there was no room for me in their dream. There was no room for the woman I was becoming. And so, with a heart that was breaking into 1,000 pieces, I made my choice. I am going too. "Barclay," I whispered, the words a death sentence to the life I had known. "And I am going to be with George." My father did not yell. He did not cry. He just nodded once, a single, sharp, and final gesture. "Luz," he said to my mother, "pack her a bag." She did. She went to my room and she packed a single, small suitcase with a few of my clothes. She did not pack the photograph of her and my father from their wedding day. She did not pack the small cross-stitched sampler my grandmother in Sibyllum had made for me. She packed only the clothes of a stranger. She handed me the bag. My father handed me the $23 from my own piggy bank. And then he opened the front door. "Go," he said. "You have made your choice. You have chosen the American way. You are on your own now." I stood there on the precipice of my own life, my heart a raw, screaming wound. "Papa," I begged one last time. He just looked at me, his eyes empty. Of all love, of all recognition. And he closed the door, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, the most final sound I had ever heard. I was 18 years old, and I was an orphan. Carmel, California. "Present-day Elena, are you still there?" The voice on the phone, the thin, frail, and ghost-like voice of my father, pulled me back across 50 years of silence. I was standing in my magnificent glass-walled living room, the Pacific Ocean roaring behind me. But I was also back on that cold, foggy sidewalk in Daly City, an 18-year-old girl with a single suitcase and $23 in her pocket. The two worlds, the two Elenas, had collided with the force of a tectonic plate shift. "I'm here!" I managed to say, my own voice a stranger's. "The social worker," he began, his voice full of a deep profound. "And 50 years too late." "Shame? She told you our situation." "Yes, your mother." "She is not well," he said. And for the first time, I heard a crack in his old iron facade. "The house. A bad investment your cousin recommended." We lost everything. He was silent for a long moment. I could hear the sounds of the homeless shelter in the background. The coughing, the shouting, sounds of pure, unfiltered desperation. This was the end result of their lifetime of sensible choices. "Of their worship of stability, Elena," he said, and the sound of my name in his mouth was a physical blow. We, your mother and I, we have nowhere else to go." He took a shaky breath, and then he asked the question that I had both dreaded and in a dark, secret corner of my heart, fantasized about for my entire adult life. The question that would finally, completely, and irrevocably flip the entire power dynamic of our broken, tragic family. A knock, he whispered. The old forgotten term of endearment, a knife in my heart. Kiwi, can we come and live with you? I stood there in the quiet of my beautiful, successful, and lonely life, the phone pressed to my ear. The ghost of my 18-year-old self was screaming, a wild, joyous, and vengeful cry of note to monoxide. Let them suffer as you suffered. But the 68-year-old woman I had become was silent. She looked at the photograph of her late beloved husband, the man they had called a demon, the man who had been the single greatest blessing of her life. She looked out at the vast, gray, and unforgiving sea, and she did not know what to say. The past had finally come to collect its debt, and I had no idea if I had the strength or the cruelty to pay it. The phone call ended, but the silence it left behind was a living thing. It was filled with ghosts. The ghost of my father's thin, reedy, shame-filled voice. The ghost of my mother, a woman I could not even picture in my mind's eye anymore, now frail and homeless. And the loudest, most powerful ghost of all, the 18-year-old girl in the worn-out coat. Standing on a foggy Daly City sidewalk 50 years ago, watching the front door of her entire world slam shut, that girl was screaming in my head a raw, primal, and deeply satisfying cry of finally, let them rot. Let them feel what you felt. I walked through my house, my beautiful, quiet, and suddenly very empty house in Carmel, and the ghosts walked with me. Every object, every piece of art, every book on my shelves was a testament to the life I had built in defiance of them. Success was my revenge. For 50 years, that had been enough. I had built a fortress of a life, and I had kept them out. Now, they were standing at the gates, not as conquerors, but as beggars. And the screaming 18-year-old inside me wanted to stand on the battlements and laugh as they starved. I sank into my late husband's armchair. The leather worn smooth and soft from the thousands of hours he had spent there, reading. I closed. My eyes and I spoke to him, my oldest and dearest habit. What do I do, George? I whispered into the quiet, empty room. What in God's name am I supposed to do? Of course, there was no answer. Only the roar of the ocean outside, a sound he had loved. But I knew what he would have said. George was a man of profound, unwavering, and sometimes deeply infuriating compassion. He was a literature professor who saw the tragic, complex humanity in every character, from King Lear to the most pathetic minor villain. He would have told me to be kind. He would have told me to forgive. He would have told me that they were my parents and that my own humanity was tied to my ability to show them grace in their moment of need. But he didn't know them. The ghost of the 18-year-old screamed back. He didn't see their faces. That night, he didn't feel the cold of that sidewalk. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be the woman George believed I was, kind and generous and forgiving. But the sudden, violent return of my parents had reawakened a part of me I had long kept dormant. A cold, hard, and deeply unforgiving part. A part that had been forged in the crucible of their rejection. I was at war with myself. The 68-year-old woman George had loved versus the 18-year-old girl my parents had created. And I had no idea who was going to win. I thought of the first few years after they had cast me out. the sheer grinding struggle of it. I had slept on the couch of a friend from high school for 6 months until her own parents had gently but firmly told me I had to go. I had worked 3 jobs. I was a waitress in a greasy spoon diner by day, a coachy girl at a fancy theater by night, and on the weekends, I cleaned houses, just like my mother had. I had scrubbed the toilets of the rich just to be able to afford the tuition at a community college. Every dollar was a battle. Every meal was a victory. And through it all, I had never once called them. My pride, my stubborn, wounded pride, was the only thing I owned. And then I had met George. He was a young, brilliant, and kind graduate student at Berkeley, and I was a tired, cynical 20-year-old who had audited one of his classes. He saw past the waitress uniform, saw the writer. He saw the mind. He was the first person in my life who had ever looked at me and seen not a disappointment, but a miracle. He was the one who encouraged me to apply to a real university, who helped me with my essays, who believed in my dream with a faith that was so pure and so absolute it taught me how to believe in it myself. He was my salvation. He was the family. I had chosen the family that had chosen me back. And my parents, they had never even met him. They had rejected him and the life he represented without ever knowing the beautiful, gentle soul of the man who had saved their daughter. How could I bring them into this house? The house George and I had built together. The house that was a monument to the very love they had tried to forbid. The thought of my father, the man who had called my husband a foolish American dream, sitting in George's armchair. It was a sacrilege. A violation, no. I could not do it. The screaming 18-year-old had won. My revenge would be a cold and quiet and deeply satisfying silence. I would tell the social worker I was sorry, but I could not help. And I would hang up the phone, and I would let the ghosts of my parents fade back into the fog of the past where they belonged. But it was not that simple, 'cause I was not just a daughter. I was a mother. I had 2 children of my own, a son, Michael, and a daughter, Sophie. They were in their 40s now, with families of their own, living their own successful, happy lives. They knew the story of my estrangement, of course, but only in the vague, abstract way that children know the stories of their parents' pasts. To them, their grandparents, Mateo and Elena Suarez, were not real people. They were mythical figures, the distant, cruel villains in their mother's origin story. And I knew, with a mother's certainty, that I could not make this decision without them. I owed them that. I called a family video conference that night. Their faces popped up on my screen, my 2 beautiful, successful, and well-adjusted children. Michael, the pragmatic lawyer in Chicago. Sophie, the compassionate pediatrician. In Seattle, I told them the story. I told them about the phone call, about the homeless shelter, and about my parents' impossible, audacious request. When I was done, they were both silent for a long time, their faces a mixture of shock and a kind of fascinated horror. Michael, my son, the lawyer, the protector, spoke first. His voice was a low, controlled fury. "Absolutely not, Mom," he said, his face a mask of cold resolve. "The answer is no. A hard, unequivocal no. You owe them nothing, less than nothing." "Michael," Sophie began, her own face a canvas of conflicting emotions. "No, Sophie, I'm serious," he said, cutting her off. "There, these people are not your grandparents. They are strangers who committed an act of unforgivable child abuse against our mother. They threw her out onto the street when she was 18. They have not spoken to her in 50 years. And now that they are old and broke, they want to show up and play the part of the loving family. It's obscene." He looked at me, his eyes full of a fierce, protective love. "You spent your entire life building a world without them. You do not, under any circumstances, have to let them back in. You have no legal and certainly no moral obligation to them." "But they're her parents," Sophie argued, her own compassionate heart wrestling with the brutal facts of the story. "They're in their 80s. They're homeless. Can we really, as a family, just let them die in a shelter? They are the architects of their own misfortune," Michael retorted, his lawyer's mind making the cold, logical case. "They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. Mom's life is not a retirement home for her own. Abusers." The argument went back and forth, a perfect externalized representation of the war that was raging in my own soul. My son, my beautiful, logical, and unforgiving son, was the voice of the 18-year-old girl, the voice of pure, righteous, and satisfying revenge. And my daughter, my kind, compassionate, and empathetic daughter, was the voice of George, the voice of grace, of forgiveness, of a humanity that was more complicated than a simple binary choice between right and wrong. The final piece of the puzzle came the next day. In a phone call from the one person in my father's family who had not participated in my 50-year exile. My Tita Rosie, my father's younger sister who lived in San Diego. We had maintained a quiet secret and very infrequent correspondence over the years. A few Christmas cards, the occasional stilted phone call. She was my one tenuous link to that other world. I called her and I told her the news. She was not surprised. "Oh, Elena," she sighed, her voice full of a deep, weary sadness. "I knew this day would come. Your father. He is the proudest and most stubborn man I have ever known." She told me the story of their downfall. It was not a grand tragedy. It was a slow, quiet, and deeply predictable implosion of their own making. After they had retired, they had been convinced by one of our cousins to invest their entire life savings in a series of guaranteed real estate ventures. The ventures had failed spectacularly. They had lost everything. "We all tried to help, Elena," Rosie explained, her voice full of a genuine pain. "My brothers and I, we offered them money. We offered them a place to live. But your father, he refused. He was too proud. He said he would not take charity from his own family. He said he would handle it himself. And then my aunt said the words that would change everything for me. 'He is a man who was born in a small village in Sibalam,' she said, 'and in some ways he never left. He has the heart of a Filipino farmer. A farmer believes in the work of his own hands. To accept help is to admit that his own hands have failed. It is a deep, profound, and very old kind of shame.'" She paused. "He did not call you because he thinks you will be easy on him, Aija. He called you because you are the one person whose help he thinks he has a right to. You are his daughter. In his mind, it is your duty. He has not called you to ask for forgiveness. He has called you to collect on a debt he believes you still owe him." And in that moment, the war in my head was over. The choice was clear. To say no, to turn them away, would be to give them the cold, unforgiving justice they so richly deserved. It would be the revenge of the 18-year-old girl to say yes. To bring them into my home would be an act of grace, the one George would have wanted, but it would also be a surrender. It would be an acceptance of their twisted, toxic, and deeply unfair definition of family, of duty. I would be letting them back in on their terms, not mine. Both paths felt wrong. One felt too cruel. The other felt too weak, so I would have to choose a third path. My own path. A path that was not about a simple yes or no. A path that was not about forgiveness and not just about revenge. A path that was about a final, absolute, and undeniable reclamation of my own story. A path that was about a different and far more creative kind of justice. That night, I sat at my desk, the roar of the Pacific a steady, powerful rhythm outside my window. My turmoil was gone. My indecision was gone. All that was left was a cold, quiet, and crystal clear sense of purpose. I was a writer, and I was about to write the final, unexpected, and deeply satisfying final chapter of my own family's long, tragic story. I opened my laptop. I did not open a blank document to begin my next novel. I opened a real estate website. And in the search bar, I typed the address of a small, forgotten, and now deeply significant house in a working-class suburb of San Francisco. The house where I was born. The house I had been thrown out of 50 years ago. My old home in Daly City, and I smiled. The plan, in all its quiet, poetic, and malicious glory, was beginning to form. The morning after my father's phone call was the first day of my new life. The war in my head was over. The screaming 18-year-old and the compassionate 68-year-old had, after a long and bloody negotiation, reached a truce. They had agreed on a third path. Not the cold, hard path of pure revenge, nor the soft, yielding path of pure forgiveness. We had chosen the path of the writer, a path of poetic and exquisitely cruel. Justice. My first call was not to the social worker. It was to my lawyer. My grandfather, in his wisdom, had insisted I retain my own legal counsel, separate from his university world years ago. I had hired the best, a sharp, formidable woman named Elizabeth Sterling, who had handled the estates of tech billionaires and Hollywood legends. She was a woman who understood the delicate art of moving mountains, quietly. Elizabeth. I said, my voice a calm, cool instrument. I have a project for you. I need to acquire a piece of residential real estate, anonymously. A passion project, Elena. She asked, her voice amused. Something like that, I replied. The property is a small single-family home in Daly City, and it's currently in foreclosure. Want you to buy it for me at the auction next week. Use the Carmel Highlands Blind Trust. Spare no expense. I want that house. The auction took place the following Tuesday. I did not attend. I sat in my own library in Carmel, 1,000 miles away, and listened on the phone as Elizabeth, my calm, professional proxy, went to war for me. It was, she told me later, a surprisingly fierce bidding war. A small development company had its eye on the property, hoping to tear it down and build a cheap, soulless duplex. They wanted the land. I wanted the history, the memory, the ghost. And as it turned out, my ghost was more valuable than their profit margin. Oh, we won. Congratulations, Elena, Elizabeth said over the phone. You are now the proud and very anonymous owner of your childhood home. I hung up the phone, a slow, strange, and deeply complex feeling washing over me. I felt a surge of triumph, the cold, clean satisfaction of a plan set perfectly in motion. But underneath it, there was a profound, aching sadness. I had just bought back the place I had been thrown out of. I had just paid a small fortune for a house full of the most painful memories of my life. The first step of my revenge was complete. And it felt, more than anything, like an act of profound and deeply necessary self-harm. A week later, I drove north. I left the sun-drenched, idyllic piece of Carmel and drove back into the foggy, gray and deeply complicated world of my own past. I had not been back to Daly City in 50 years. The city had changed. It was now the vibrant, beating heart of the Bay Area's Filipino community. But my old neighborhood, a quiet, working-class street of small, identical houses, felt exactly the same. And then I saw it. My house. It was smaller than I remembered, the way all childhood places are. It was in a sad state of disrepair. The paint was peeling. The small front lawn was a patch of brown, dead grass. It looked abandoned, unloved. A house without a family. A house without a soul. It looked exactly the way I had felt the night they had closed the door on me. The lawyer had sent me the keys. My hand was trembling as I put the key in the lock. The door swung open with a familiar, mournful creak. I stepped inside. The house was empty, the rooms hollow and echoing, but the ghosts were all still there. I could see them. I stood in the living room and I saw my father, a young, strong man then, his face full of a tired, angry disappointment as he handed me my $23. I saw my mother, her face a mask of cold, hard grief, as she handed me the small, sad suitcase that was to be my entire world. I could still feel the suffocating weight of their disapproval. Of their rigid, unbending, and deeply fearful love. I walked into the kitchen, the tiny, cramped room where my mother had spent most of her life, a magician who could conjure feasts from a nearly empty pantry. This was the room where she had taught me the stories of her own home, of Sibyllum. It was in this room that I had learned about the spirit of Bayanahan, of a community that works together. It was in this room that she had taught me that a person's real wealth was in their heart, not their house. And it was in this room that she had finally, tragically, sided with her husband, choosing the rigid traditions of the old world over the fierce, independent spirit of her own American daughter. I walked into my old bedroom. It was a tiny, box-like room, barely big enough for a bed and a small desk, but it had been my sanctuary, my library, my launch pad. This was the room where I had read Hemingway and dreamed of Paris. This was the room where I had written my first terrible and wonderful short stories. This was the room where I had fallen in love with George over long, secret, late-night phone calls. And this was the room my mother had stripped bare, packing only the clothes of a stranger, leaving behind every book, every photograph, every small personal treasure that had made up the geography of my own soul. I stood in that empty room for a very long time, and I let myself feel it all. The anger, the grief, the profound 50-year-old wound of their rejection. I had to feel it all one last time. Because I was not just here to visit the ghosts. I was here to perform an exorcism. I was here to tear this sad, broken house down to the studs and to rebuild it into something new. Something that was not theirs. Something that was, finally and completely, mine. The renovation was not just a construction project. It was an act of creation, and it was an act of war. I hired a brilliant, young, and very expensive architect from San Francisco. I gave her a simple, and in her world, very strange directive. I "Want you to take this small, dark, and sad house," I told her, "and I want you to fill it with light." And she did. The next 6 months were a blur of demolition and reconstruction. We knocked down walls, the cramped, claustrophobic living. Room and kitchen were transformed into a single, large, open-plan great room. We tore out the small, sad windows and replaced them with massive floor-to-ceiling panes of glass that flooded the space with the cool, gray and beautiful light of the daily city fog. The design was a fusion of my two worlds, a conversation between my past and my present. The floors were a pale, minimalist, polished concrete, a nod to the modern artistic world of my Carmel home. But the ceiling beams were exposed, and I had them clad in a rich, dark, and beautiful narrow wood, the national tree of the Philippines. We installed a huge, modern, professional-grade kitchen, but in the back. I had them build a traditional dirty kitchen, a rustic open-air space with a proper wood-fired oven, the kind my grandmother had used in Siloam. It was the perfect, beautiful, and deeply personal fusion of my two identities. My Filipino soul and my American life, finally, happily, living together under one roof. The main house became a testament to the woman I had become. A place of light, of art, of stories. It would be my new, quiet, and deeply inspiring writer's retreat. And then there was the garage. It was a small, detached structure at the back of the property, a place where my father had stored his tools and his disappointments. It was a cold, dark, and forgotten space. And it was the centerpiece of my quiet and exquisitely cruel revenge. I had my architect and my construction crew transform it. They did a beautiful job. They insulated the walls. They put in a new, modern bathroom and a small, efficient kitchenette. They installed a comfortable bedroom and a small, bright living area. It was in every way a perfect, respectable, and completely self-contained one-bedroom apartment, a granny flat. It was safe, it was clean, it was comfortable, and it was undeniably the garage. It was not the main house. It was the outbuilding, the guest quarters, the place where the help would have lived. It was a beautiful, comfortable, and perfectly designed cage. I had it furnished, not with the beautiful, expensive art from my Carmel home, but with tasteful, durable, and completely impersonal furniture from a mid-range store. It was a home that had no history, no soul. It was a space designed for mere survival, not for living. It was, in its own quiet, polite, and devastating way, a perfect reflection of the life my parents had always wanted for me. A safe, sensible, and completely passionless existence. I was going to give them exactly the life they had tried to force upon me. By the end of the 6 months, the project was complete. The old, sad house was gone, and in its place was a beautiful, light-filled monument to my own resilience. And in its shadow, the small, neat, and perfectly respectable garage apartment sat, waiting patiently for its new and permanent tenants. I stood on the new, beautiful porch of my reborn childhood home. The garden was being replanted, not with my father's sensible vegetables, but with a chaotic, beautiful jungle of flowers. The fortress of my past had been transformed into a sanctuary for my future. The pain was still there, a faint, silvery scar. But it was no longer an open wound. It was just a part of the story. I took out my phone. I dialed the number 4, the San Mateo County social worker. The trap was built. The cage was furnished. The ghosts were exorcised. It was time to invite my parents home. The house in Daly City was no longer a ghost. It was my creation, a beautiful, light-filled testament to the life I had built. The renovations were complete. The small, perfect, and deeply deceptive garage apartment was furnished and waiting. The stage was set. All that was left was to invite the lead actors to their final, tragic performance. But as I stood in the quiet, empty great room, a new, unexpected, and deeply unsettling feeling began to creep in. Doubt? Was this justice? Or was it just a more creative, more expensive, and more protracted form of cruelty? Was I honoring my own values? Or was I simply becoming a mirror of their own cold, controlling nature? I had spent 50 years being the victim of their rigid, unbending worldview. And now I was about to impose my own rigid, unbending solution upon them. The architect of the cage, I was beginning to realize, is also a prisoner of its design. I was a 68-year-old woman, and I was still at war with the ghosts of my 18-year-old self. I needed counsel. I needed to talk to the one part of my life that my parents had never managed to touch, to taint, or to control. My own family. I called my children that night, Michael and Sophie. I laid out the entire insane and magnificent plan for them. The house, the renovation, the beautiful, comfortable, and deeply humiliating garage apartment. Michael, my son, the pragmatic lawyer, was silent for a long moment after I had finished, and then he let out a low whistle of pure, unadulterated admiration. "Ah!" he said, his voice full of a laughing professional respect. That is the most beautifully, diabolically elegant legal and emotional checkmate I have ever heard of in my entire life. It's a work of art. It's perfect." He saw the cold, brilliant logic of it. He saw the justice. But Sophie, my daughter, the compassionate pediatrician, was quiet. When she finally spoke, her voice was full of a gentle, worried concern. "But Mom," she said softly, "it's so cold. They're in their 80s. They're broken. Isn't there a part of you that just wants to forgive them? To let them into your life, your real life in Carmel? To let them be grandparents to their own great-grandchildren?" Her question was a perfect silver dart, and it went straight to the heart of my own conflict. A part of me, a small, stubborn, and deeply wounded part, did want that. It wanted the storybook ending, the tearful reconciliation, the deathbed apology. The version of the story where my parents finally looked at me and said, "We were wrong. We are so proud of you." But I knew, with the cold, hard certainty of a 50-year-old wound, that I would never get that. My parents were not characters in one of my novels. They were who they were. Proud, stubborn, and unbending. To bring them into my home in Carmel would not be an act of forgiveness. It would be an act of surrender. It would be me, once again, contorting my own life to fit their needs, their expectations. It would be me letting them win in the end. "Your grandmother," I said to my own children, my voice finding a new, strange clarity as I spoke the words out loud. "The woman you never got to meet. She came to this country from a small town called Sibilum, and she tried for years to live in two worlds. She tried to be a good, traditional Filipino wife and a modern American woman. And it was a constant, exhausting battle. I thought of my mother, of her quiet, simmering frustrations. My parents, their love was a cage. A beautiful, well-intentioned, but very small cage. They wanted me to be safe. They did not want me to be free. I looked at the faces of my own beautiful, free children on the screen. "The greatest gift I have ever given to both of you," I said, my voice thick with a sudden, powerful emotion, "is the freedom to be who you are, to love who you love, to build your own lives. That is a gift my parents never gave to me." I took a deep breath. This plan, it is not just about revenge, Sophie. It is about a final, definitive declaration of my own freedom. I will give them a safe place to live. I will fulfill my duty as a daughter. I will give them shelter. But I will not, after all these years, give them my home. My home. The one I built with your father. The one that is filled with my own stories. That is a place they have not earned the right to enter. My mind was made up. The doubt was gone, replaced by a cold, hard, and deeply peaceful resolve. The next morning, I made the call. I did not call my father directly. The thought of his voice, of his inevitable, prideful refusal to ask for help directly, was more than I could bear. I called the social worker, Ms. Jenkins. I asked her if she would be willing to arrange a conference call with me and with my parents. She agreed. An hour later, I was on the phone. A strange three-way conference of ghosts. Ms. Jenkins was the professional neutral mediator. And my father, Elena Suarez, his voice thin and reedy, was the reluctant, humiliated party of the third part. "Mr. Suarez," Ms. Jenkins began, her voice calm and gentle. "Your daughter Elena is on the line. She has had some time to consider your situation, and she would like to make you an offer." The line was silent. I could hear my father's shallow, ragged breathing. "Elena," he finally whispered. "I'm here, Papa," I said, and the old forgotten name felt strange and heavy in my mouth. I did not offer condolences. I did not ask about their health. I was not their daughter in that moment. I was a benevolent, distant, and utterly professional case manager. I laid out my offer in a calm, clear, and non-negotiable monotone. "I have been made aware of your housing and financial situation." I began, my voice a cool, practiced instrument. "I understand you are in need of a permanent living arrangement." I paused, letting the cold, clinical words sink in. "I have, through my own resources, arranged for a place for you and Mama to live. It is a private, comfortable, and fully furnished home. It will be made available to you for as long as you both shall live, completely rent-free." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could hear the social worker's own sharp intake of breath. I had expected my father's pride to rear its ugly head. I had expected him to refuse my charity. But 50 years of struggle and the final brutal indignity of a homeless shelter had apparently done what I never could. It had broken him. When he finally spoke, his voice was a choked, broken whisper. You would do that?" he asked, his voice thick with a disbelief that was so profound it was almost a form of grief. "Yes," I said. "But why?" he asked. The one question I had been dreading. The one question that was a trap. I chose my words with the care of a poet or a liar. "Because," I said, and the lie was so beautiful, so perfect. It was almost the truth. "You are my parents, and it is my duty to ensure you are taken care of." The tears came then. I could hear him weeping, the ragged, ugly sobs of an old, proud man who has just been confronted with a form of grace he cannot possibly comprehend. He handed the phone to my mother, and I heard her voice for the first time in half a century. It was a thin, frail, and bird-like thing. She just kept whispering, "Thank you, Anak, Ko. Thank you," over and over again, the words a desperate, grateful prayer. They accepted, of course, with a profound, tearful, and utterly clueless relief. They had no questions about the location. They had no questions about the details. They were drowning, and I had just offered them a lifeboat. They did not think to ask where the boat was sailing. They just wanted to get out of the cold, dark water. The final phase of my plan was a masterpiece of logistical precision. Did everything through the social worker. I was a distant, benevolent, and completely invisible force. I arranged for a car service to pick my parents up from the shelter. I had my own personal shopper from Neiman Marcus go and buy them several sets of new, comfortable clothes and had them delivered to Ms. Jenkins. I was performing the role of the dutiful, wealthy daughter with a flawless and deeply satisfying perfection. I flew back to Daly City the day before they were scheduled to arrive. I went to the house, my house, and I prepared the final details. I went to the beautiful, light-filled main house, my new writer's retreat, and I locked the door. Then I went to the small, perfect, and deeply symbolic garage apartment. I stocked the small new refrigerator with food. I put a bouquet of fresh flowers on the small, sensible dining table. I made the bed with fresh, clean linens. It was a perfect, comfortable, and respectable home. Safe, clean, and sensible cage. It was ready. The next afternoon, I sat on the porch of the main house, a cup of tea in my hand, and I waited. I had told the car service the address. I had told the driver not to answer any questions. I knew the exact moment of their arrival, and then I heard it. The sound of a car, a smooth, expensive sedan, turning onto my old, familiar street. It slowed, and then it pulled into the driveway. My driveway. I stood up, my heart a calm, steady drum. I walked to the edge of the porch. The car door opened, and my father, looking frail and ancient, stepped out. He looked at the house, his house, our house, and his face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. He looked at the new paint, the new windows, the beautiful flowering garden where his dead brown lawn used to be. He looked at me, standing on the porch of the home he had thrown me out of, a stranger in the landscape of his own past. The moment of reckoning was at hand. 50 years of pain, of anger, of a quiet, burning, and relentless desire for justice had all led to this single, perfect and terrible moment. The ghosts had finally, after all these years, come home, and I was waiting for them. They arrived on a Tuesday, a day as gray and nondescript as the life they had once planned for me. I was on the porch of my new writer's retreat, my old home, a cup of tea in my hand, when the black town car I had sent for them pulled into the driveway. It moved with a quiet, funereal slowness. I watched as the driver got out and opened the rear door. My father, Elena Suarez, emerged first. The 50 years since I had last seen him had stooped his proud, rigid shoulders and turned his thick, black hair into a thin, white wisp. He was an old man, a frail, defeated old man. He looked at the house, his house, our house, and his face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Then my mother, Luz, got out. She was smaller than I remembered, her movements slow and hesitant. She leaned on my father for support. She, too, just stared, her mouth slightly agape at the vision before her. They were looking at a ghost, the ghost of their own past resurrected into something beautiful, modern, and completely alien to them. They saw the new wide windows, the beautiful flowering garden, the sleek, modern lines of the architecture. And then I saw my father's eyes land on the new, elegant mailbox by the door. On the name, rendered in clean, steel letters, Dr. Elena Suarez Martin. My name, my late husband's name. A life they had tried to erase, now the official legal owner of their entire history. I stood up from my chair as they slowly, hesitantly made their way up the new stone walkway. I was calm. My heart was a quiet, steady drum. The screaming 18-year-old girl inside me was silent for the first time in half a century. She was just watching, waiting. Elena. My father whispered, his voice a dry, reedy rasp. He looked from me to the house and back again, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile the two. What is this? I don't understand. This was our house. It was, I said, my voice polite and distant and utterly devoid of the emotion that was churning in my soul. It's mine now. My mother just stared at me, her eyes the same dark eyes as my own, full of a deep, profound confusion. She looked so lost, so frail. A small, treacherous part of me wanted to run to her, to wrap my arms around her, to tell her everything was going to be all right. But I held my ground. The time for that, the time for a daughter's love, had passed 50 years ago. I was not her daughter today. I was her landlady, you said. You said you had found a place for us, my father stammered. I have, I said. I have kept my promise. Please, let me show you. I did not lead them to the front door of the main house. I led them around the side, onto a newly laid path of smooth, gray flagstones. A path that led inexorably to the back of the property. They followed me in a stunned, shuffling silence, their eyes darting around at the beautiful, unfamiliar landscaping, at the strange new geography of their own past. They were trespassers in their own memory. I stopped in front of the small detached structure at the end of the path, the garage. It was transformed, of course. It had a new roof, new siding, a charming little porch with a small cafe table and 2 chairs. It had a new, friendly-looking blue door. It was, by any objective measure, a lovely, respectable, and perfectly charming little cottage. But it was, and would always be, the garage. Here we are, I announced, my voice a bland, cheerful, tour guide monotone. I unlocked the blue door and swung it open. Welcome home. I stepped aside and let them enter. I watched their faces as they took it all in. The small but clean and bright living area. The new efficient kitchenette with its gleaming unused appliances. The small comfortable bedroom, the new modern bathroom. It was perfect. It was respectable. It was a safe and warm and deeply, profoundly humiliating cage. My father just stood in the middle of the small room, turning in a slow, bewildered circle. He looked at the low ceilings. He looked at the small windows that faced the back of the main house. He finally seemed to understand. He was not a guest of honor. He was a tenant, a charity case. He was living in the shadow of the very life he had tried to destroy. This is the garage, my mother whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thing. It is, I confirmed, my voice still polite, still distant. I had it converted. I think you'll find it quite comfortable. And then, finally, my father looked at me. His eyes, for the first time, were not full of anger or disappointment or pride. They were full of a deep and final and soul-crushing understanding. The game was over, and he had lost. This was the moment, the final act, the last great and closing monologue of a story that had been 50 years in the making. I stood in the doorway of their new, small life, and I gave them their final verdict. "You asked me for help," I began, my voice no longer the voice of the tour guide, but the voice of the woman I had become, calm and quiet and utterly, completely in control. "You asked me for shelter, and I have given it to you. This is your home now. As I promised, you will live here for the rest of your lives completely rent-free. Your utilities are covered. I have arranged for a grocery delivery service too. Come once a week. You will be safe here. You will be comfortable. I have fulfilled my duty as a daughter." I paused, letting the words settle, letting them feel the cold transactional nature of my generosity. "But you will not," I said, my voice dropping a half octave, becoming as hard and as sharp as a piece of obsidian, "live in my house." I gestured behind me towards the beautiful, light-filled main house that was now mine. "That house, the one you threw me out of on a cold, foggy night 50 years ago, is mine now. I bought it. I own it. I rebuilt it from the studs, and I filled it with the light and the life that you tried so hard to extinguish in me. It is a monument. It is a testament to the life you told me I could never have. The life of a writer. The life I built with George, the man you called a foolish American dream. The man who was the greatest love and the greatest truth of my life." I looked at their two old, crumbling faces, at their shocked, wounded eyes. "You taught me that. The most important thing in the world was security," I said, my voice quiet, but each word a carefully aimed blow. "And you were right. This," I gestured to the small, safe, and respectable garage apartment around them, "this is security. It is a roof over your head. It is food in your belly. It is exactly the life you wanted for me. A small, safe, and predictable existence. So I am giving it to you as a gift." I took a step back, out onto the small porch. "But my mother," I said, and the memory of her fierce, quiet love was a fire in my heart. "She taught me something." "Else?" "The woman from Sabellum, the woman you tried so hard to make small, she taught me about Bayanahan. She taught me that a home is not just a place to be safe. It is a place to be free. It is a place of community, of joy, of love." I looked at my house, at my real home. That is my home. That is my Dungog, my honor, the one I built myself with no help from you. "And my home," I said, my voice a final, quiet, and utterly unforgiving whisper, "is a place you have not earned the right to enter." I took a set of 2 keys from my pocket. I placed them on the small cafe table on their new porch. "I will not be seeing you again," I said. "The social worker has my contact information for any true emergencies. Otherwise, I would ask. You two respect my privacy." I looked at them one last time. My father, the proud patriarch, was weeping, silent tears streaming down his wrinkled, ancient face. My mother was just staring at me, her eyes full of the dawning, terrible understanding of the true cost of their own cruelty. They had not just lost their house. They had lost their daughter, completely and irrevocably. They had been given charity, but they had been denied family. They had been given a place to live, but they had been permanently and beautifully exiled from the heart of the one person they had thrown away. I turned and I walked away. I walked down the stone path, through the garden, and back to the porch of my own house, my real house. I did not look back. I sat down in the comfortable armchair, the one George had loved, and I looked out at my beautiful, chaotic, and fiercely beloved garden. The fog was beginning to roll in from the Pacific, a soft gray blanket. The house was quiet. The ghosts were gone. The screaming 18-year-old girl inside me was finally, blessedly silent. My 50-year war was over, and I was, at last, at peace. My world now is very small. It is the size of this clean, new, and perfectly respectable room. It is a world of quiet, comfortable chairs I did not choose, of tasteful beige walls that hold no memories, of a small, efficient kitchen that I have no heart to cook in. From my window, the one above the kitchen sink, I have a perfect and perfectly cruel view of the main house. My old house. Her new house. I watch the lights go on and off. I see the shadows of her moving through the rooms that were once mine. And I, Elena Suarez, a woman who is not yet dead but is no longer truly living. I have become a ghost in the garden of my own daughter's success. Mateo, my husband, sits in the armchair most of the day. He does not read. He does not watch the television. He just sits. A great, proud, and ancient tree that has been hollowed out from the inside. The fire of his pride, the fire that kept us both warm and righteous for 50 years, has been extinguished. All that is left is the cold gray ash of his own profound and irreversible mistake. We do not talk about it. We do not talk about her. We are two ghosts haunting this small, clean, and utterly silent garage. We are safe. We are cared for. And we are in hell. She was right, you know. My daughter. In her final, terrible, and beautiful speech, she said this was the life we had always wanted for her. A small, safe, and predictable existence. And she was right. It was a lie I told myself for so long that I came to believe it was the truth. But it was, and has always been, a lie. I close my eyes, and I am a young girl again, in Sibilam. The air is not the cold, damp fog of Daly City. It is the warm, thick, and living air of my home, smelling of the sea and the sweet, hot scent of frying bananas from the market. My world then was even smaller than this garage. It was a small nipa hut with a dirt floor. But it was a world that was full of a fierce, desperate, and beautiful life. I was a dreamer, too, once. I did not dream of books. Like my Elena, I dreamed of colors. I wanted to be a weaver. I would watch the old women at their looms, their hands a blur of motion, creating the beautiful, complex patterns of the patadon cloth. It was a kind of magic to me, a story told in thread. I had a gift for it. The old women said I had the cleverest hands in the village, but my father, a good, hard, and deeply practical man, he saw no future in it. Weavers do not eat luz. He had told me, his voice not cruel, but full of the grim, hard-won truth of his own difficult life. You will learn to be a good wife. You will learn to cook and to clean and to keep a good house. That is a woman's art. That is a woman's security. And so I did. I put away my dreams of color and thread, and I learned the practical art of survival. And then I met Mateo. He was strong and proud and ambitious. He had a dream that was bigger than our small village. He dreamed of America. And the girl who was taught that a woman's duty was to her husband, I followed him. I put my own small, secret dreams away in a box, and I sailed across the ocean to help him build his. Our life in America was hard. It was a world of gray skies and a language I did not understand. Case was a world that saw my brown skin and heard my accent and decided I was a servant. so I served. I cleaned the beautiful empty houses of rich, white women, and Mateo worked in the factory. We worked and we saved, and we built a small, safe, and respectable life. We bought the house in Daly City, a real house with wooden floors and glass windows. We had done it. We had achieved the dream, but it was a dream built on a foundation of fear. The fear of poverty, the fear of failure, the fear of this new, strange, and intimidating world. And that fear became the law of our house. Our daughter, our beautiful, brilliant, American-born daughter, she was not born with our fear. She was born with a new, strange, and terrifying thing called hope. She was me, you see. The me I had been forced to lock away. The girl who dreamed. Of art, of stories, of a life that was more than just safe. And it terrified me. Her dreams, her books, her love for the gentle, clever American boy. It was a threat to the small, safe, bitter world we had built. We saw her hope not as a beautiful flower, but as a dangerous weed that had to be pulled out before it destroyed the neat, orderly rows of our sensible garden, so we did it. We pulled her out by the roots. We cast her out. We told ourselves it was for her own good. We told ourselves it was love, tough, practical, and deeply Filipino kind of love. The love that chooses security over a dream. We had to break her heart, you see, to save her life. But we were the ones who were wrong. She did not wither. She did not fail. She grew. She found her own sun, her own water. And she blossomed into something more magnificent than we could have ever imagined, and we were left in the small, dark, and airless world of our own fear. Our bad investments were not the reason we lost everything. They were just the symptom. We had lost everything the night we closed the door on our own. Daughter, the night we chose to be safe instead of choosing to be brave. I look out the window now. It is evening in Daly City. The fog is rolling in, and I see her. My daughter, Elena. She has come to visit her new writing retreat. She is not looking at our small garage. She is in the garden, her garden, the one. She has planted in the barren soil of our old backyard. It is a riot of color, of flowers I do not recognize. She is with her own children. My grandchildren and their children. My great-grandchildren, who I have never met. They are laughing. A sound that has not been heard in this yard for 50 years. She is showing them a flower. She is telling them a story. She looks happy. She looks strong. She looks free. I am a ghost. A woman in a window looking out at a life I was invited to, but was too afraid and too proud to join. My revenge, my punishment, is not this small, comfortable room. It is the view. The view of the beautiful, vibrant, and joyful world my daughter built, a world that she built, not just without me, but in spite of me. I cannot ask for her forgiveness. It is a thing I have not earned. But here, in the quiet of my new, small, and final home, I can offer her my blessing, a silent secret, and 50 years too late admission of my own profound and irreversible failure. You were right. Ana Kao, I think, my hand pressed against the cold glass of the window. You were right. Burn brighter.